Welcome to a story of cold aristocracy, wounded pride, and the dangerous game of love in Regency England. If you're watching from New York, London, Tokyo, or anywhere in between, drop your city in the comments below. And if this story pulls you in, hit that like button and stay until the very end. You won't believe how this Duchess turned a brutal command into her greatest weapon. The wedding night began with champagne and ended with a knife to the heart. Not a literal blade, of course. The aristocracy was far too refined for such vulgarity. But when Duke Adrian Blackthorne turned to his new bride in the gilded silence of his ancestral bedroom and delivered his first command as her husband, Lady Eliza Rowan felt something inside her chest crack open and bleed. "Give me an heir," he said, his voice as cold as the December frost coating the windows of Blackthorne Manor, "and then disappear." 6 words. That was all it took to reduce a woman who had once believed in fairy tales to something less than human. Less than a wife. Barely more than a broodmare with a title. Eliza stood frozen in her wedding gown, ivory silk that had cost more than most families earned in a year, now feeling like a burial shroud. Her hands, still trembling from the weight of the ceremony, clenched into fists at her sides. "I beg your pardon?" Her voice came out steadier than she felt. Adrian didn't even look at her. He was already moving toward his dressing room, shrugging off his coat with the casual dismissal of a man removing an uncomfortable piece of clothing. "You heard me perfectly well. This marriage serves a purpose, securing the Blackthorne line. Beyond that, I have no need of a wife underfoot. You'll have your own apartments, your own staff, your own life. I suggest you make it a quiet one." The door closed behind him with a soft click that echoed like a gunshot. Eliza stood alone in the master bedroom of one of England's most powerful ducal houses, still wearing her wedding dress, still wearing the diamond tiara that marked her as the new Duchess of Blackthorne, and felt the full weight of her mistake crash down upon her shoulders. She had married a ghost. No, worse than a ghost. She had married a man who had died years ago and refused to admit it. 3 months earlier, Eliza had been a different person entirely. Lady Eliza Rowan, youngest daughter of the Earl of Ashford, had never been the beauty of the family. That honor belonged to her older sister Charlotte, who had golden curls and a laugh like bells and had married a viscount at 19. Eliza was the clever one, the bookish one, the one who spent more time in her father's library than at balls. She had resigned herself to spinsterhood with surprising grace, until the Duke of Blackthorne came to dinner. "He's considering you," her mother had whispered frantically while Eliza's maid laced her into her best evening gown. "The Duke himself. Do you understand what this means? The Blackthorne fortune, the Blackthorne name. Eliza, this is your chance." "Mother, I've never even met the man." "He's a duke, darling. You don't need to have met him." That should have been Eliza's first warning. Adrian Blackthorne arrived precisely on time, which somehow made him more intimidating rather than less. He was tall, easily over 6 feet, with dark hair going silver at the temples despite being only 32. His eyes were the color of winter ice, pale blue, and just as warm. He was, objectively, one of the most handsome men Eliza had ever seen. He was also the most terrifying. Not because he was cruel, not because he raised his voice or made threats, but because when he looked at her across her father's dining table, she saw absolutely nothing in his eyes. No interest, no warmth, no humanity, just cold calculation. "Lady Eliza," he said, when they were finally introduced properly in the drawing room after dinner. "I understand you're well educated. I enjoy reading, Your Grace." "Politics or poetry?" "Both, though I find politics infinitely more practical." Something flickered in his expression, so fast she almost missed it. A refreshing answer. Most young ladies claim to prefer romance novels. Most young ladies have been taught that admitting to intelligence makes them unmarriageable. "And you?" Eliza met his ice blue gaze directly. "I assumed I was already unmarriageable, Your Grace. Intelligence seemed a reasonable consolation prize." For the first time that evening, Adrian Blackthorne smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. "You're honest. I appreciate that." He set down his brandy glass. "I'll be direct, Lady Eliza. I need a wife. Not a companion, not a love match. A wife to manage my household and provide an heir. In return, you'll have wealth, status, and freedom to pursue whatever interests you choose, provided they don't embarrass the Blackthorn name. If this arrangement appeals to you, I'll speak to your father tomorrow." Eliza's mother looked ready to faint from joy. Her father looked troubled but said nothing. Eliza looked at the Duke of Blackthorn and saw a man offering her a business transaction dressed up as a marriage proposal. She should have said no. She should have recognized the warning signs, the complete absence of warmth, the transactional nature of his offer, the way he spoke about marriage like a man purchasing property. Instead, she heard herself say, "That seems reasonable, Your Grace," and sealed her fate. The engagement lasted 6 weeks. In that time, Eliza saw her future husband exactly 4 times, twice at formal dinners, once at the theater, and once when he came to finalize the marriage settlements with her father. He was unfailingly polite, utterly distant, and completely uninterested in knowing anything about her beyond what was strictly necessary. "Does he always wear black?" Eliza asked her maid, Catherine, while being fitted for her wedding trousseau. "They say he's been wearing mourning since his first engagement ended, my lady." Eliza's hand stilled on the silk fabric. "His first engagement?" Catherine's eyes went wide. "You didn't know? Oh, my lady, I thought surely someone had told you." "Told me what?" The maid glanced toward the door, then lowered her voice. "It was 7 years ago. The Duke was engaged to Lady Vivian Hartley. They say she was the most beautiful woman in London. The wedding was planned, the announcements made. Then 3 days before the ceremony, she ran off with his best friend, eloped to Scotland." The room seemed to tilt slightly. "She left him at the altar?" "Worse, my lady. She left him a letter explaining that she'd never loved him, only his title and fortune. Said she'd been having an affair with his friend for months. The scandal nearly destroyed him. They say he locked himself in Blackthorn Manor for a year afterward and emerged a completely different man." Suddenly, everything made terrible sense. The coldness, the emotional distance, the transactional marriage proposal. Adrian Blackthorn hadn't died. He'd been murdered by betrayal and somehow kept walking. Eliza told herself she could work with this. She told herself that understanding his pain meant she could eventually reach him. She told herself that beneath the ice there had to be something human left. On her wedding day, standing at the altar of St. George's Church in Hanover Square, she looked into Adrian's pale blue eyes and searched desperately for a sign that she'd made the right choice. He looked back at her with all the warmth of a marble statue. "I do," he said when prompted. The words sounded like a business agreement being finalized. Perhaps that's all they were. Gods. The wedding breakfast was a blur of champagne toasts and well wishes from people who barely knew her. Eliza smiled until her face hurt, played the role of the blushing bride, and tried to ignore the way Adrian stood slightly apart from her at all times, as if maintaining physical distance could protect him from emotional contamination. "You make a lovely couple, sir," the Dowager Countess of Pembroke said warmly, taking Eliza's hand. "I knew the Duke's mother, you know. She would have been so pleased to see him married again." "Again?" Eliza's smile froze. The Dowager's face paled. "Oh dear, I meant, that is—" She patted Eliza's hand awkwardly and fled. Catherine appeared at Eliza's elbow. "It's time to change for the journey, my lady. I mean, Your Grace?" "Your Grace." She was a duchess now. The title felt like a crown made of ice. The journey to Blackthorn Manor took 3 hours by carriage. Adrian spent the entire trip reading correspondence, barely acknowledging her presence. Eliza watched the countryside roll past and tried to calm the growing dread in her stomach. She was married, to a stranger, who clearly wanted nothing to do with her beyond the basic biological necessity of producing an heir. "I can make this work," she told herself. "I can be the perfect duchess. I can make him see that this marriage could be more than a transaction." Blackthorn Manor rose from the Kentish countryside like something from a Gothic novel, all gray stone and mullioned windows and centuries of aristocratic power carved into every architectural detail. It was beautiful in a cold, imposing way that perfectly matched its master. The staff lined up to greet their new mistress. The housekeeper, Mrs. Davison, was a stern woman in her 50s who looked at Eliza with thinly veiled skepticism. The butler, Harrison, was ancient and glacially polite, 20 other servants whose names Eliza tried desperately to remember while her heart hammered against her ribs. Mrs. Davison will show you to your apartments, Adrian said, already turning away. I have business to attend to. Dinner is at 8. And just like that, he vanished into the depths of his ancestral home, leaving Eliza standing in the marble entrance hall surrounded by servants who clearly had no idea what to make of their new Duchess. Mrs. Davison led her through a maze of corridors to a suite of rooms on the second floor. They were beautiful, decorated in soft blues and creams, with enormous windows overlooking the gardens and furnishings that cost more than most houses. They were also on the opposite end of the manor from the Duke's apartments. His Grace thought you'd prefer privacy and quiet for your personal space, Mrs. Davison said in a tone that made it clear this arrangement was permanent. You have a private sitting room, dressing room, and bedroom. The connecting door leads to His Grace's apartments, though it's kept locked from his side. Locked from his side. I see, Eliza managed. Will that be all, Your Grace? Yes, thank you, Mrs. Davison. The housekeeper left. Eliza stood alone in her beautiful prison and tried not to cry. She had known this wouldn't be a love match. She had accepted that Adrian wanted a practical arrangement. But somehow, standing in these perfectly decorated rooms that screamed, "Stay here and don't bother me," the reality hit her like a physical blow. Her husband didn't want her, not as a companion, not as a friend, not as anything beyond a biological function. Catherine arrived with her trunks and immediately began chattering about the manor, the staff, the gardens, anything to fill the awful silence. Eliza let the words wash over her while she changed for dinner, choosing a simple green silk gown that suddenly felt ridiculously elaborate for a meal she'd be eating with a man who could barely stand to look at her. Dinner was exactly as terrible as she'd feared. Adrian sat at one end of an enormous dining table. Eliza sat at the other end, approximately 12 feet away. Between them stretched an expanse of polished mahogany, silver candlesticks, and excruciating silence. "How do you find the manor?" Adrian asked after the first course was served. "It's beautiful, Your Grace. You may call me Adrian. We're married." "Are we?" Eliza wanted to ask, because it doesn't feel like it. Instead, she said, "Then you should call me Eliza." "Very well." He returned to his soup. Silence descended again, broken only by the soft clink of silver against china. Eliza tried again. "The gardens are remarkable. Do you spend much time there?" "Not particularly." "I noticed the library. It's quite extensive. Feel free to make use of it." Another conversational dead end. She set down her spoon carefully. "Adrian, are we going to speak to each other at all, or is this marriage to be conducted entirely in monosyllables?" He looked up at her, and for a moment something almost like surprise crossed his face. "Most wives would consider silence preferable to my company." "I am not most wives." "No," he said slowly, studying her with those ice-blue eyes. "I suppose you're not." For a heartbeat, Eliza thought she'd broken through, that beneath the frost, there might be something human after all. Then Adrian looked away, effectively ending the conversation. They finished the meal in silence. Later that night, standing in her bedroom while Catherine helped her undress, Eliza finally allowed herself to acknowledge the truth. She had made a catastrophic mistake. "Are you all right, Your Grace?" Catherine asked gently, unlacing the corset. "I'm fine. It's your wedding night, and you seem alone?" Eliza laughed bitterly. "That's because I'm alone, Catherine. I married a man who wants me to give him an heir and then vanish. Those were his exact words." Catherine's hands stilled. "He said that to you?" "On our wedding night, before you arrived to help me undress the first time." Eliza turned to face her maid, the only person in this entire manor who seemed to actually care about her well-being. "He wants a transaction, not a marriage, an heir, not a wife." "Oh, my lady." "Don't." Eliza held up a hand. "Don't pity me. I knew what I was agreeing to. I didn't understand what it would actually feel like." She dismissed Catherine and stood alone in her wedding nightgown, another piece of expensive silk meant to seduce a husband who had no interest in being seduced. The connecting door to Adrian's apartments remained locked. He didn't knock. He didn't come. Hours passed while Eliza sat by the window, watching the moon rise over the Blackthorn estate and wondering if she'd just locked herself into a lifetime of beautiful, empty rooms and a husband who would never see her as anything more than a necessary inconvenience. Finally, near midnight, she heard footsteps in the corridor. The connecting door unlocked. Adrian entered without knocking, still fully dressed in his dinner clothes. He looked at her sitting by the window, and something unreadable flickered across his face. "We should discuss expectations," he said. Not hello, not good evening, not even an acknowledgement that this was their wedding night. Just, "We should discuss expectations." "Of course," Eliza said, forcing her voice to remain calm. Adrian remained standing near the door, as if afraid to come closer. "I need an heir. You understand this." "I understand that's why you married me, yes." "Beyond that," he paused, seeming to search for words. "Beyond that, I have no expectations of you. You'll have complete freedom to manage the household as you see fit. You'll have your own allowance, more than generous. You can pursue whatever interests occupy you. I won't interfere with your life if you don't interfere with mine." Each word landed like a stone dropping into still water. Eliza stood slowly. "And what about our life together?" "We don't have a life together. We have a marriage contract." "I see." She moved toward him, watching his jaw tighten as she approached. "And this heir you require, how exactly do you propose we go about creating one if we are to live completely separate lives?" A muscle jumped in Adrian's cheek. "I'm not a fool, Eliza. I understand basic biology." How reassuring. "Don't, He stopped himself, visibly gathering control. "Don't make this more difficult than it needs to be. This arrangement benefits us both. You have status, wealth, freedom. I have—" "What do you have, Adrian?" Eliza asked, surprised by the anger suddenly burning in her chest. "A wife who's been ordered to disappear. An heir conceived in duty rather than love? What exactly do you gain from this miserable arrangement besides a child to carry on your precious name?" "I gain certainty," he said coldly. "I gain a situation where I know exactly what to expect and will never be blindsided by betrayal disguised as affection." The truth hit her like a slap. "This isn't about me at all, is it? This is about her, about Vivian Hartley and what she did to you 7 years ago." Adrian's face went rigid. "You know about Vivian?" "I know she broke your heart. I know she betrayed you publicly. I know she turned you into this—" Eliza gestured at him helplessly. "Into this frozen version of a man who's so terrified of being hurt again that he won't even allow his own wife close enough to have a conversation." "You know nothing." His voice had gone dangerously quiet. "Then tell me!" Eliza heard herself shouting and couldn't stop. "Tell me what she did that was so terrible it killed every human feeling you had left. Tell me why you married me if you have no intention of ever treating me like anything more than an inconvenient necessity." "Because I needed a wife who wouldn't expect love," Adrian roared back, finally showing some emotion beyond icy control. "I needed a woman who understood that this marriage is a transaction and wouldn't try to turn it into some romantic fantasy that will only end in disaster. I needed—" He stopped abruptly, breathing hard. They stared at each other across the beautiful bedroom. Eliza felt tears burning behind her eyes and refused to let them fall. "You needed a woman who wouldn't make you feel anything at all." Adrian's jaw worked. "Yes." The honesty of it was somehow worse than a lie would have been. "Then you married the wrong person," Eliza said quietly, "because I am not capable of living a half-life and a half-marriage to a man who looks at me like I'm already a disappointment. You want me to disappear? Fine. Give me a week to understand the household, and then you'll barely know I exist. You'll have your heir when biology permits, and then you'll have exactly what you wanted. A Duchess who stays out of your way." She moved toward the connecting door, intending to return to her room. Adrian's hand shot out, catching her wrist. The touch burned. It was the first time he'd voluntarily touched her since placing the ring on her finger at the altar. "Eliza, let me go, Adrian. I didn't mean—" He stopped, clearly struggling with words that didn't come naturally. "This doesn't have to be a war." "No," Eliza agreed, looking down at his hand on her wrist. "It doesn't have to be anything at all. That's what you wanted, isn't it? Nothing. She pulled free and left, closing the connecting door behind her. It locked with a soft click. This time, from her side. The next morning, Eliza woke with a plan. If Adrian Blackthorne wanted a duchess who would disappear, she would give him exactly that. But not in the way he expected. She would not fade into the background like a forgotten piece of furniture. She would not become a quiet, obedient wife who existed only to warm his bed when needed and vanish the rest of the time. Instead, she would become so essential, so integral to the functioning of his world, that the idea of her disappearing would be impossible. She would make herself indispensable. And in doing so, she would prove something Adrian Blackthorne clearly needed to learn, that the woman he'd tried to reduce to a transaction was capable of being far more than he'd ever imagined. Catherine found her at dawn, already dressed and making notes at the writing desk. "Your Grace, is everything all right?" Eliza looked up with a smile that held absolutely no warmth. "Everything is perfect, Catherine. I'd like a complete accounting of the household budget by this afternoon. Also, arrange meetings with Mrs. Davison, Harrison, and the estate steward. I want to understand exactly how this manor operates." "All of it?" "Every detail." Catherine's eyes widened. "His Grace usually oversees—" "His Grace," Eliza interrupted calmly, "has far more important matters to attend to than household management. That's what wives are for, isn't it?" Over the next week, Eliza threw herself into understanding the Blackthorne estate with the same intensity she'd once applied to her father's political treatises. She reviewed every account book, interviewed every senior servant, inspected every corner of the manor and its grounds. What she found was chaos masked by tradition. The household accounts were a disaster, not through theft or malice, but through decades of inefficiency and outdated practices that no one had bothered to update. The manor was hemorrhaging money on suppliers who overcharged because they knew no one was paying attention. The staff were overworked in some areas, underutilized in others. The estate farms were producing half what they should because the tenant agreements hadn't been revised in 40 years. Eliza documented everything. Then she began fixing it. "Mrs. Davison, we'll be switching to this supplier for linens. They offer the same quality at 30% less cost." "But, Your Grace, we've used the same linens merchant for 50 years, and they've been overcharging you for 49 of them. Make the change." "Harrison, I'm restructuring the footman's duties. This rotation makes no sense. The Duke prefers tradition. The Duke will prefer not wasting money on redundant staffing. Implement the new schedule." She was firm, fair, and utterly unwilling to accept "we've always done it this way" as an acceptable answer. Within 2 weeks, she'd reduced household costs by 20% while actually improving service. The staff, initially resistant, began to respect her. Adrian noticed. Of course he noticed. He said nothing directly, but Eliza caught him watching her sometimes. At dinner, in the library, when she was discussing estate business with his steward. Those ice-blue eyes following her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Confusion, maybe. Or the first stirrings of something that might eventually become respect. "You're making changes," he said one evening at dinner, breaking their usual silence. "I am." "Significant changes. The household was inefficient. I've corrected that." Adrian set down his wine glass. "Most duchesses concern themselves with menus and flower arrangements." "I am not most duchesses." Eliza met his gaze across the table. "You said I had freedom to manage the household as I saw fit. I'm managing it. If you disapprove, say so." He studied her for a long moment. "I don't disapprove." "Good." Something almost like a smile tugged at his mouth. "You're stubborn." "I prefer determined." "You're not what I expected." "No," Eliza agreed. "I'm better." This time he did smile, just barely, but it was there. Progress. 6 weeks into the marriage, Eliza received her first social invitation. Lady Pemberton was hosting a charity dinner to raise funds for a foundling hospital. Would the new Duchess of Blackthorne honor them with her presence? Eliza read the invitation twice, then went to find Adrian. He was in his study, a masculine sanctuary of dark wood and leather that she'd never been invited to enter. She knocked anyway. "Come in." He looked up from his desk, surprised to see her. "Eliza, is something wrong?" I've received an invitation, Lady Pemberton's charity dinner for the Foundling Hospital. Accept it if you wish. You don't need my permission to attend social functions. I was hoping you would accompany me. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. No. Adrian, I don't do society functions. I thought I'd made that clear. Eliza closed the door behind her and approached his desk. You're a duke. Society functions are part of your responsibilities. I fulfill my responsibilities to Parliament and my estates. Beyond that, I have no interest in parading myself before a crowd of gossiping aristocrats who have nothing better to do than dissect my private life. You mean you don't want to face the whispers about Vivian Hartley? His eyes went cold. Don't presume to understand my motivations. Then explain them to me. Because from where I stand, it looks like you're hiding. I am not hiding. You've built a fortress around yourself and refused to let anyone in. You married me and immediately tried to make me disappear because you're terrified that if I get too close, I might hurt you the way she did. You won't attend social functions because you can't stand the idea of people seeing you as anything other than the Ice Duke who doesn't feel anything anymore. Eliza leaned forward, palms flat on his desk. That's not strength, Adrian. That's cowardice. He stood abruptly, chair scraping back. You have no right? I have every right. I'm your wife. And I am so tired of living in the shadow of a woman who destroyed you 7 years ago and apparently still controls every decision you make. They were shouting now, faces inches apart across the desk. Adrian's breathing was ragged. You want to know why I won't go to these functions? Fine, I'll tell you. Because the last time I appeared in public with a woman I was engaged to marry, she humiliated me in front of all of London. She made me believe she loved me, that we would build a life together, and then she destroyed me so thoroughly that I spent a year wishing I was dead. So forgive me if I'm not eager to repeat the experience. The raw pain in his voice stopped Eliza's anger cold. Adrian, she said softly, I am not Vivian. I know that. Do you? Because you treat me exactly like you expect me to betray you at any moment. You keep me at arm's length, refuse to let me be a real wife, and now you won't even be seen in public with me because you're afraid of what people might think or say. I'm protecting myself. No, you're punishing yourself, and you're punishing me for her crimes. Eliza straightened. I'm going to Lady Pemberton's dinner. I would like my husband to accompany me, but I will not beg. The choice is yours. She turned to leave. Eliza, wait. She stopped but didn't turn around. Adrian's voice came from behind her, quieter now. What if you're wrong? What if I'm not capable of being what you need? It was the most honest thing he'd ever said to her. Eliza looked back at him over her shoulder. Then at least we'll both know I tried. Calm. Adrian attended the dinner. He didn't announce his decision. He simply appeared in the entrance hall on the evening of the event, dressed impeccably in black evening clothes, and offered Eliza his arm. She took it without comment, though her heart was pounding. The carriage ride into London was silent. Lady Pemberton's townhouse blazed with lights and chatter. The moment Adrian and Eliza entered, conversation faltered. Every eye in the room turned toward them. The Ice Duke had emerged from his exile, and he'd brought his new Duchess. Your Grace! Your Grace! Lady Pemberton swept forward, practically vibrating with excitement. How wonderful that you could both attend. Please, come meet our other guests. We're so honored. The evening became a blur of introductions and careful small talk. Eliza could feel the weight of every gaze, hear the whispers that followed them from room to room. That's the new Duchess of Blackthorn. I heard he hasn't attended a society function in 5 years. She's not what I expected. Do you think he actually cares for her, or is this just for appearances? Adrian's arm remained tense under her hand. His face was a mask of aristocratic control, but Eliza could feel the coiled tension in his body. Then Eliza saw her, a woman standing near the fireplace, beautiful in a calculated way, with dark hair and eyes that held a cruel intelligence. She was watching Adrian with an expression of smug satisfaction. Eliza knew who she was before anyone said her name. Lady Vivian Hartley. She'd remarried, Eliza realized. The man beside her wore a baronet's ring, clearly a significant step down from a duke, but enough to maintain her place in society. Vivian's gaze slid to Eliza, a
assessment and dismissal happening in a single glance. Then she smiled. It was the smile of a predator that had just spotted wounded prey. She began moving toward them through the crowd.
Eliza felt Adrian freeze. "We should leave," he said quietly, urgently. "No." Eliza, say, "No, we are not running from her." "You don't understand." "Then help me understand." Eliza turned to face him fully, forcing him to look at her. "Right now, in this moment, you have a choice. You can run, like you've been running for 7 years. Or you can stand beside me and show her that she no longer has any power over you. She doesn't, then prove it." Vivian reached them before Adrian could respond. "Adrian," she purred, her voice honey and poison mixed together. "How absolutely delightful to see you in society again. And this must be your new Duchess." Her emphasis on the word new was deliberate, cutting. Adrian's jaw was locked so tight Eliza worried his teeth might crack. "Lady Hartley," he managed. "Oh, please, we're old friends. Call me Vivian." She turned to Eliza with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You're very brave, Your Grace. Most women wouldn't dare try to thaw the ice duke. I do hope you have better luck than I did." The insult was wrapped in concern, but it was an insult nonetheless. Eliza felt Adrian's arm tremble under her hand. She could let him handle this. Step back and watch him either crumble or lash out. Or she could do what she'd been doing since their wedding night. Fight. "How kind of you to worry," Eliza said sweetly, matching Vivian's false warmth with her own. "But I find that ice melts quite readily when treated with genuine warmth rather than calculated manipulation. Perhaps that was your mistake." Vivian's smile froze. Several nearby guests suddenly found their champagne glasses fascinating. "How charming," Vivian said, her voice hardening. Adrian always did appreciate a sharp tongue, though I wonder how long that appeal will last once the novelty wears off. "I imagine it will last considerably longer than an appeal based solely on youth and beauty," Eliza replied calmly. "Those fade, after all. Intelligence and genuine affection tend to improve with age." Adrian made a sound that might have been a strangled laugh. Vivian's face flushed with anger. "You have no idea what you're talking about, girl. Adrian and I had something real, something you'll never understand." "Did you?" Eliza tilted her head. "Because from what I understand, you had his title and his fortune in your sights, and the moment a more immediate opportunity presented itself, you abandoned him without a second thought. That doesn't sound like something real. That sounds like the behavior of a shallow, grasping woman who made a terrible mistake and has been regretting it ever since." The room had gone completely silent. Vivian's eyes blazed. "You don't know anything about what happened between us." "I know that you hurt him badly. I know that you betrayed his trust in the cruelest possible way. And I know—" Eliza squeezed Adrian's arm gently, feeling him standing rigid beside her, "that despite your best efforts to destroy him, he's still standing, still a better person than you'll ever be. And yes, still a duke, while you're— what was it? A baronet's wife now?" The cut landed. Vivian's face went white, then red. For a moment, Eliza thought the woman might actually slap her. Instead, Vivian drew herself up with wounded dignity. "This conversation is beneath me." "Most things are beneath you," Eliza agreed pleasantly. "That's what happens when you spend your life looking down on everyone else." Vivian turned and swept away, her baronet husband scrambling after her. The room exploded into excited whispers. Eliza suddenly became aware that her heart was hammering and her hands were shaking. She'd just publicly eviscerated one of London society's most notorious women in defense of a husband who barely spoke to her. She looked up at Adrian. He was staring at her with an expression she'd never seen before. "We should go," he said quietly. "Did I overstep? I didn't mean to cause a scene, but she was—" "Eliza." Adrian's hand covered hers on his arm. "We should go, now." His tone wasn't angry. It was something else entirely. They made their excuses to Lady Pemberton and fled to their carriage. The moment the door closed, shutting them into privacy, Adrian turned to her. "Why did you do that?" "She was attacking you." "Why did you defend me?" His voice was intense, searching. "You could have stepped back. Let me handle it. Instead, You destroyed her in front of half of London society. Why? Eliza met his gaze in the darkness of the carriage. Because she hurt you. Because she's been controlling your life for 7 years through fear and trauma. Because, her voice caught. Because you're my husband, Adrian, and I will not stand by and watch someone tear you down. Something in his expression cracked. I've been cruel to you, he said quietly. Yes. I've treated you as if you were her, as if you were trying to hurt me. Yes. I've been a terrible husband. Spectacularly terrible, Eliza agreed. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. You're honest, at least. I'm tired of pretending, Adrian. Tired of living in separate apartments and separate lives while we're supposed to be building something together. I don't expect love. I don't even expect friendship at this point. But I do expect basic human decency and the acknowledgement that I exist as more than just a vessel for your heir. Adrian was quiet for a long moment, studying her in the dim light filtering through the carriage windows. What if, he said slowly, carefully, we started over? What? Not as strangers marrying for convenience, but as two people who are already married and trying to figure out how to make it work. He took a shaky breath. I can't promise to be the husband you deserve immediately, but I can promise to try. If you're willing to be patient with a man who spent 7 years being dead inside. It wasn't a declaration of love, it wasn't even a promise of affection, but it was real. It was honest. It was the first genuine thing Adrian Blackthorne had offered her since their wedding night. Eliza held out her hand. Hello, Adrian. I'm Eliza, your wife. He took her hand, and for the first time his touch held warmth instead of ice. Hello, Eliza, he said softly. I'm Adrian, and I'm an idiot who's been wasting the last 2 months treating his wife like an enemy when she's been trying to be an ally all along. That's a good start, Eliza said, smiling despite the tears burning in her eyes, though you left out emotionally damaged and spectacularly stubborn. I was trying to make a good impression. Little late for that. Adrian actually laughed. A real laugh, rusty from disuse but genuine. It was the most beautiful sound Eliza had ever heard. The carriage rolled through the London streets, carrying them back to Blackthorne Manor, back to a marriage that had started as ice and duty and might, just might, be beginning to thaw into something real. It wasn't a happy ending, not yet, but for the first time since their disastrous wedding night, it felt like the possibility of one. And for Eliza Blackthorne, Duchess of Ice and Determination, that was enough. For now. The thaw didn't happen overnight. In the weeks following Lady Pemberton's dinner, Adrian began appearing at breakfast. Not every morning, his years of isolation couldn't be undone in days, but enough that Eliza stopped being surprised when she entered the morning room and found him already there, reading the newspaper over coffee. Good morning, he said one Thursday, 3 weeks after the Vivian incident. Good morning. Eliza took her seat, trying not to show how much these small moments meant to her. They ate in companionable silence, which was better than the hostile silence that had characterized their first months of marriage. Progress came in increments. Then Adrian set down his newspaper. I've been thinking about your education programs. Eliza looked up sharply. She'd mentioned the idea once, weeks ago. A school for young women from poor families, teaching them skills that might lift them out of poverty. Adrian had nodded politely and changed the subject. She'd assumed he'd forgotten or dismissed it as a frivolous Duchess hobby. What about them? She asked carefully. You'll need funding, substantial funding, if you want it to succeed. He pulled a document from beside his plate. I've had my solicitor draw up the initial framework for a charitable trust, £20,000 to start, with annual contributions thereafter. Eliza stared at him. £20,000? It's a conservative estimate. You'll likely need more once you understand the full scope of what you're attempting, but it's enough to secure a building, hire instructors, and support the first year of operations. Adrian, that's an enormous amount of money. I'm an enormously wealthy man, Eliza, and my wife is proposing something worthwhile. He met her eyes across the table. I should have asked about this sooner. I should have supported it from the beginning. I'm trying to do better. Something warm unfurled in Eliza's chest,
Thank you, she said quietly. Don't thank me yet. You'll have opposition. The aristocracy doesn't take kindly to duchesses who challenge the social order. Educating poor women, giving them opportunities beyond service, there will be people who see that as dangerous. Let them, Eliza said firmly. I'm not afraid of opposition. Adrian smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes. No, you're not, are you? That afternoon, Eliza met with 3 potential instructors in the Blackthorn Townhouse Library. Catherine took notes while Eliza outlined her vision: reading, writing, arithmetic, basic business skills. Everything a young woman would need to become a governess, a lady's companion, a shopkeeper, something beyond a scullery maid or a factory worker. It's ambitious, Your Grace, said Miss Thornton, a middle-aged woman who'd taught at a girls' school before it closed for lack of funds. And if I may be frank, it will make you enemies. I'm aware. People will say you're overstepping, that you're filling these girls' heads with ideas above their station, that you're creating discontent among the lower classes. People said similar things about educating women of any class, Eliza replied coolly. Yet here we are, 3 educated women having a conversation. If the world survived aristocratic women learning to read, I suspect it will survive shopgirls doing the same. Miss Thornton's eyes gleamed with approval. When do we start? Within a month, Eliza had secured a building in Southwark. Not a fashionable district, but close enough to where her target students actually lived. She hired 4 instructors, established a curriculum, and began quietly spreading word through church networks and charitable organizations. The Blackthorn School for Young Women opened on a rainy Tuesday in April. 60 girls showed up for the first day of classes. By the end of the week, there were nearly 100. London society noticed. Your Grace, there's been some discussion, Lady Pemberton said carefully over tea. They'd become friendly since the dinner party, bonding over charitable work. About your school. Let me guess, Eliza said dryly. Some people think I'm corrupting the lower classes with education. Some people think you're being reckless. These girls come from rough backgrounds, Eliza. There are concerns about safety, about propriety, about whether it's appropriate for a duchess to be so directly involved in helping people? Lady Pemberton sighed. You know what I mean. There are proper channels for charity, fundraising balls, donations to established institutions. What you're doing it's radical. Good. Eliza, I appreciate your concern, Margaret, truly. But I'm not going to apologize for giving young women opportunities that might actually change their lives. If that makes me radical, so be it. News of the school spread through aristocratic circles like wildfire. Some praised Eliza's charitable spirit, others whispered that she was overstepping, that a duchess shouldn't dirty her hands with actual work, that she was setting a dangerous precedent. Adrian heard the whispers. They're calling you the radical duchess, he said one evening over dinner. I've heard worse. Eliza, I support what you're doing, but you need to understand, there will be consequences. Social consequences. People will use this against you. Let them try. Eliza set down her fork. Adrian, these girls have nothing. No opportunities, no futures beyond backbreaking labor or worse. If teaching them to read and write makes me a radical, then I'm proud to be one. He studied her across the table, and something in his expression made her breath catch. You're remarkable, he said quietly. I don't think I've told you that. Heat flooded Eliza's cheeks. You're supporting a school that could cost you politically. You're changing lives. That's worth more than political capital. Adrian paused. I'm proud to be married to you. It was the first time he'd ever said anything like that. Eliza had to look away before the tears in her eyes became visible. The school flourished. By summer, they had 200 students and a waiting list. Eliza spent 3 days a week there, teaching classes herself, meeting with students, dealing with the endless logistics of running an educational institution. She'd never been happier. Then Vivian Hartley struck back. It started with whispers, quiet rumors circulating through drawing rooms and gentlemen's clubs. Nothing concrete, just suggestions. The Duchess of Blackthorn spent an awful lot of time in Southwark, didn't she? With those long absences from home, who knew what she was really doing? There were reports of men visiting the school, male instructors, male donors,
So much time alone with men who weren't her husband. The rumors were poison dressed up as concern. Eliza first heard them from Margaret Pemberton, who came to Blackthorn Manor looking stricken. "I don't believe a word of it," Margaret said immediately. "But Eliza, people are talking. They're saying terrible things about you and the school." "What things?" Margaret's face flushed. "That you're using the school as a cover. That you're having an affair. Multiple affairs. That Adrian's so distant you've sought companionship elsewhere." Ice flooded Eliza's veins. "That's absurd." "I know, but the rumors are everywhere. Someone's spreading them deliberately, and they're detailed enough to sound credible." "Who?" "I don't know. But Eliza, you need to be careful. These kinds of whispers can destroy a reputation." That evening, Eliza told Adrian everything. He listened in silence, his face growing steadily colder. "Vivian," he said flatly when she finished, "you think she's behind this?" "I know she is. This is exactly her style. Quiet, vicious, designed to cause maximum damage while keeping her hands clean." Adrian stood abruptly, pacing. "She's punishing you for embarrassing her at the dinner party, and she's punishing me through you. What do? We ignore it. Rumors fade if you don't feed them. But the rumors didn't fade. They grew. A week later, a scandal sheet published an anonymous letter describing in lurid detail how the Duchess of Blackthorn had been seen entering a hotel with a mysterious gentleman who was definitely not her husband. It was a complete fabrication. But it was printed, which made it real in the eyes of society. Eliza's charitable donors began pulling support. Parents started withdrawing their daughters from the school, afraid of the association. Invitations dried up. The Ice Duke's wife was becoming a pariah. Adrian confronted her in the library one evening, holding the latest scandal sheet. "This has gone far enough," he said, his voice tight with barely controlled rage. "I'm going to sue them for libel. I'm going to expose every lie and destroy everyone involved in spreading this filth." "That will only make it worse," Eliza said quietly. She was sitting by the fire, outwardly calm, while inside she felt like she was being torn apart. "A lawsuit will just give the rumors more publicity." "So we do nothing? We let them destroy your reputation with lies?" "I don't know." The words came out sharper than she intended. "I don't know what to do, Adrian. Everything I've built is falling apart because someone decided to spread vicious gossip, and I have no idea how to fight back." Adrian crossed to her, kneeling beside her chair. It was the first time he'd ever positioned himself physically below her, putting them at eye level. "This is my fault," he said hoarsely. "Vivian is doing this because of me. Because I married you, because you defended me, because she knows the best way to hurt me is through you. This isn't your fault. Yes, it is, and I'm going to fix it." "How?" "I don't know yet, but Eliza, I swear to you, I will not let her destroy you the way she tried to destroy me." His hands covered hers, warm and solid. For the first time in weeks, Eliza felt something other than helpless rage. She felt hope. The next morning, Adrian disappeared. He left before breakfast, taking his personal secretary and his solicitor with him. When Eliza asked the staff where he'd gone, no one knew. He returned 3 days later, grim-faced and exhausted. "What did you do?" Eliza asked. "I found proof." Adrian dropped a folder on the library desk. Bank records showing payments from Vivian to the scandal sheet editor. Signed letters from witnesses she bribed to say they'd seen you with other men. Correspondence between her and the anonymous letter writer, who turns out to be her personal maid. Eliza stared at the documents. "How did you get these?" "I called in every favor I've accumulated over the past decade. I paid investigators. I threatened people who deserved to be threatened." His jaw was tight. "I did what needed to be done." "Adrian, she made one mistake," he continued, his voice hard. "She underestimated how far I would go to protect my wife. She thought I was still the broken man she left behind, too damaged to fight back. She was wrong." Eliza picked up one of the letters. Vivian's handwriting was distinctive, damning. "What happens now?" "Now?" Adrian smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. "Now I give her a choice. She can publicly retract every lie and disappear from London society forever.
Or I can take this evidence to every newspaper in England and destroy her so completely that she'll never show her face in polite company again. She'll never agree to disappear. Then I'll destroy her. There was no doubt in his voice, no hesitation. Adrian Blackthorne, who had spent 7 years hiding from society, was prepared to go to war for his wife. The realization stole Eliza's breath. "I don't want you to destroy her for me," she said quietly. Adrian's expression softened. "Eliza, I want us to destroy her together." His eyes widened slightly. Eliza stood, moving around the desk until she was standing directly in front of her husband. "You said we should start over, that we should try to build something real. This is real, Adrian. This is us standing together against someone who tried to tear us apart. You want to confront her? I want to make it very clear that the Duchess of Blackthorne is not a woman to be trifled with, and that the Duke of Blackthorne stands beside his wife." She picked up the folder of evidence. "Let's pay a visit to Lady Hartley." They arrived at the Hartley townhouse unannounced. The butler tried to turn them away. "Lady Hartley is not receiving visitors." But Adrian simply walked past him. "I'm a duke," he said flatly. "I don't need an invitation." They found Vivian in her drawing room, entertaining several society ladies over tea. Her face went white when she saw them. "Adrian, Your Grace." She stood hastily. "What a surprise." "Leave us," Adrian said to the other women. They scattered like frightened birds. Once the room was empty, Adrian closed the door, locked it. Vivian's composure cracked slightly. "This is highly inappropriate." "So is fabricating evidence of adultery," Eliza said calmly, taking a seat on the sofa as if she owned the place. "So is bribing witnesses. So is attempting to destroy someone's reputation through lies and manipulation." "I have no idea what you're talking about." Adrian dropped the folder on the tea table. Papers spilled out. Bank records, letters, witness statements. All damning, all irrefutable. Vivian stared at the evidence, her face cycling through shock, fear, and finally rage. "You broke into my private correspondence." "No," Adrian said coldly. "I investigated a criminal conspiracy. There's a difference." "This is entrapment. This is proof." Eliza picked up one of the letters, holding it delicately. "Your handwriting, Vivian, your signature. Your plot to destroy me because I had the audacity to defend my husband from your poison." "He was mine first!" The words burst out before Vivian could stop them. Adrian laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "I was never yours. You wanted my title and my money. When you couldn't have both immediately, you betrayed me. You don't get to claim me now. I made a mistake. You made a choice. And you've spent 7 years making more choices, including the choice to try to destroy my wife because you can't stand that I've moved on." Vivian's eyes blazed. "Moved on? You're barely civil to each other. This isn't a real marriage." "You know nothing about our marriage," Eliza interrupted quietly. The words carried more weight than shouting would have. "You know nothing about what we've built together. And the fact that you tried to tear it down with lies says far more about you than it does about us. You can't prove," Adrian pointed at the evidence. "I can prove everything. Bank statements showing you paid Thomas Mitchell, editor of the Daily Scandal, £500 to publish those letters. Signed testimony from your maid admitting you dictated the anonymous accusations. Receipts from the hotel you claimed Eliza visited, showing that no one matching her description was ever there." The color drained from Vivian's face. "Here's what's going to happen," Adrian continued, his voice dangerously soft. "You're going to write a public retraction. You're going to admit that the rumors about my wife were false and malicious. You're going to apologize publicly. And then you're going to leave London and never return. You can't force me, or," Eliza said pleasantly, "we take this evidence to every newspaper in England. We file criminal charges for libel and conspiracy. We make sure that everyone knows exactly what you did and why. We destroy you so completely that even your husband's baronetcy won't save your reputation." Vivian looked between them, trapped. "You wouldn't dare," she whispered. Adrian stepped closer, and his expression was colder than Eliza had ever seen it. 7 years ago, you destroyed me because you thought I was weak, because you thought I would break and never recover. You were wrong then, and you're wrong now.
I'm not that man anymore. And the woman you tried to destroy? He glanced at Eliza. She's stronger than both of us combined. So yes, Vivian, we absolutely would dare. Silence fell, broken only by the ticking of the mantel clock. Vivian's shoulders slumped. Fine. I'll write the retraction. Today, Eliza said firmly. It will be published in tomorrow's papers, all of them. And then you'll leave, Adrian added. Your husband has an estate in Scotland, doesn't he? I suggest you retire there, permanently. Vivian's eyes glistened with tears of rage and humiliation. I loved you. No, Adrian said quietly. You loved what I represented. There's a difference. He took Eliza's arm. We're done here. They left Vivian standing in her drawing room, surrounded by evidence of her own malice. In the carriage, Eliza finally allowed herself to shake. That was... She couldn't find words. Terrifying, Adrian supplied. Exhilarating, he laughed. A real laugh, surprised and genuine. You were magnificent. We were magnificent, Eliza corrected. Together. Adrian's hand found hers in the dim carriage. Together. The retraction appeared in every major newspaper the next morning. Vivian's words were carefully chosen, admitting fault without revealing the full extent of her conspiracy. It was enough. Within a week, the whispers stopped. Donors returned to the school. Invitations began arriving again. The Duchess of Blackthorn's reputation was restored, but something else had changed too. Adrian started appearing at the school. Not every day, but once or twice a week, he would arrive unannounced and observe classes. He donated books, arranged for guest lecturers, used his political connections to find employment for graduates. You're getting invested, Eliza teased one afternoon, watching him discuss mathematics with a particularly bright student. Your school, he corrected. And yes, it's worthwhile work. They were standing together in the courtyard, watching students pour out for their afternoon break. Young women laughing, studying, planning futures they'd never thought possible. Thank you, Eliza said quietly, for believing in this, for believing in me. Adrian turned to face her fully. Eliza, I need to tell you something. His tone made her heart skip. What? That first night, our wedding night, when I told you to give me an heir and disappear. He paused, struggling for words. I was trying to protect myself. I thought if I kept you at a distance, you couldn't hurt me. I thought I was being smart. Adrian, I was being a coward, and I nearly destroyed the best thing that's ever happened to me. His hand came up, hesitating, then gently cupped her cheek. You are nothing like Vivian, nothing like anyone I've ever known. You're brave and brilliant and so strong it terrifies me, and He stopped, breath catching. I'm falling in love with you, he whispered. I don't know when it started. Maybe that night when you defended me to Vivian. Maybe before. But Eliza, I look at you and I feel something I thought died 7 years ago. I feel hope. Tears blurred Eliza's vision. Say something, Adrian said softly. Please. You absolute idiot, Eliza managed through her tears. I've been in love with you for months, since you first smiled at me over that ridiculous dinner table, since you trusted me enough to come to Lady Pemberton's party, since you fought for me against Vivian without hesitation. Eliza, she kissed him. There in the courtyard of her school, surrounded by students who immediately started giggling and whispering, Eliza Blackthorn kissed her husband properly for the first time. Adrian froze for a heartbeat, then pulled her closer, kissing her back with years of repressed emotion finally breaking free. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Eliza was laughing and crying at the same time. We're causing a scandal, she whispered. Let them talk, Adrian replied, not letting her go. I spent 7 years caring too much about what people thought. I'm done hiding. That night, Adrian came to her apartments, not out of duty, out of love. He knocked softly, waiting for permission instead of assuming it. Eliza opened the door wearing a simple nightgown, her hair loose around her shoulders. May I come in? Adrian asked quietly. Always. He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. For a moment, they just looked at each other. Really looked, without walls or defenses, or the accumulated hurt of months of misunderstanding. I don't know how to do this, Adrian admitted.
How to be a husband who actually loves his wife. How to be vulnerable without being terrified. Eliza took his hand, leading him toward the bed. Then we'll figure it out together, like everything else.
What happened next was tender and tentative, and nothing like the cold transaction Adrian had once imagined. It was real. It was love. And when Eliza woke the next morning to find Adrian still there, his arm wrapped around her waist, his breathing soft and even against her neck, she felt something she'd never expected to feel in this marriage. Complete. The weeks that followed were the happiest of Eliza's life. Adrian moved his things into her apartments. Our apartments, he corrected when she pointed this out. They had breakfast together every morning. He attended school functions, met with her instructors, helped navigate the political complications of running an institution that challenged social norms. They talked, really talked, about everything. His past, her dreams, their future. They were building something real. And then, on a golden afternoon in late August, everything changed. Eliza was teaching a literature class when the nausea hit. She barely made it outside before being violently ill in the rose garden. Catherine found her there, pale and shaking. "Your Grace, how long has this been happening? This is the first time." Eliza stopped. Thought. "Though I've been tired lately, and I haven't." Their eyes met. "Oh," Eliza whispered. 3 days later, the physician confirmed it. She was pregnant. The heir Adrian had once demanded as a cold transaction was now growing inside her, conceived in love, wanted beyond duty. Eliza told him that evening in the library. Adrian was reviewing estate papers when she entered, and something in her expression made him immediately set everything aside. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong." Eliza took his hands, pulling him to standing. "Adrian, I'm pregnant." He went absolutely still. He couldn't seem to finish the sentence. "Yes." For a long moment, Adrian just stared at her. Then his knees buckled and he sat down hard in his chair, looking stunned. "Adrian, say something." "I'm going to be a father." His voice was wondering, awed. "We're having a child. Are you happy?" He looked up at her, and his eyes were wet. "Eliza, I once told you to give me an heir and disappear. I treated creating a child like a business transaction, and now—" His hand came up, trembling slightly, to rest on her still flat stomach. "Now I can't imagine anything more precious than this, than you carrying our child, than building a family together." Eliza felt tears spilling down her cheeks. "I'm terrified," Adrian admitted. "What if I'm a terrible father? What if I can't?" "You'll be wonderful," Eliza interrupted firmly, "because you've learned to love again, because you've let yourself be vulnerable, because you're not the frozen man I married anymore. Because of you. Because you chose to change." Adrian stood, pulling her into his arms. "Our child will never doubt they're wanted, will never feel like an obligation or a duty. I swear it." "I know." They stood together in the fading afternoon light, holding each other, planning futures neither had dared imagine 6 months ago. But outside Blackthorn Manor, shadows were gathering, because Vivian Hartley had left London. But she hadn't forgotten, and she was about to make one final devastating move. The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning, 3 weeks after Eliza had told Adrian about the pregnancy. It was addressed to Adrian in an elegant hand he recognized immediately. The wax seal bore the Hartley crest. He opened it in his study, alone. What he read made his blood run cold. "No," he whispered. "No, no, no." The door burst open. Eliza stood there, still in her morning dress, face flushed from climbing the stairs too quickly. The physician had told her to rest more, but she'd never been good at following orders. "I heard you shouting, 'What's wrong?'" Adrian looked up at her, the letter trembling in his hands. For a moment, he couldn't speak, couldn't find words for what Vivian had done. "Adrian, you're scaring me." He handed her the letter. Eliza read it once, then again, her face going progressively paler. "She can't," Eliza said finally, her voice barely audible. "She can't do this." "She already has." The letter was simple, brutal in its simplicity. Vivian had filed a criminal complaint accusing Eliza of running a front for prostitution. She claimed the Blackthorn School for Young Women was actually recruiting poor girls into immoral service, using education as a cover. She had witnesses, dozens of them, she claimed, who would testify that young women were being sent from the school to brothels across London. It was an outrageous lie. It was also legally dangerous and socially catastrophic. "She's insane," Eliza said, still staring at the letter. "No one will believe this. We have records. We have testimonials from students. We have—" "Witnesses can be bribed," Adrian said flatly. "Evidence can be fabricated. Vivian learned that from watching me expose her conspiracy. Now she's using the same tactics against us." "But why? We destroyed her. She left London. Why come back now?" Adrian took the letter from her shaking hands. "Because she has nothing left to lose. We took everything from her. Her reputation, her place in society. This is her final revenge. If she's going to be ruined, she'll ruin us too. The school will be shut down immediately. Once these accusations become public, no parent will allow their daughter near it. Every donor will flee. And you," Adrian's voice cracked, "you'll be arrested, Eliza, charged with procuring and corruption. Even if we prove your innocence eventually, the scandal alone will destroy everything you've built." Eliza sat down hard in the nearest chair, one hand unconsciously moving to her stomach. Their child, growing inside her while her entire world collapsed. "We fight," she said finally, "like we did before. We expose her lies. She's anticipated that." Adrian pointed to a paragraph near the end of the letter. "She's filing the complaint anonymously through a magistrate she's paid off. By the time we trace it back to her, the damage will be done. And she's not in London anymore. She's in Scotland, protected by her husband's estate, and too far away to be easily confronted. So she gets to destroy me from a distance while we can't touch her?" "Yes." The word hung in the air like a death sentence. Eliza stood abruptly, pacing. "No, I refuse to accept this. There has to be something we can do." "I'm already working on it. I've sent for the best solicitors in England. I'm calling in favors from every contact I have. But Eliza, you need to understand, even if we win, the fight will take months, maybe years. And during that time, you'll be facing criminal charges while pregnant. The stress alone. I don't care about the stress. I care about those girls. The students who finally have hope for a future beyond poverty. If the school closes, they lose everything." Adrian crossed to her, taking her shoulders gently. "If you're arrested and convicted, you could go to prison. Our child would be born in a cell. Is that what you want?" "Of course not. But I can't just surrender." "I'm not asking you to surrender. I'm asking you to be smart about how we fight this." Before Eliza could respond, Harrison appeared in the doorway, looking grim. "Your Grace, there are constables at the door. They have a warrant for Her Grace's arrest." The bottom dropped out of Eliza's world. "Already?" Adrian's face went white. "The complaint was only filed yesterday." "She planned this perfectly," Eliza said numbly. "Timed it so we'd have no chance to prepare a defense." The sound of heavy boots echoed from the entrance hall. Adrian grabbed her hand. "Listen to me. Say nothing to them. Not a word. I'll have you released on bail within hours. We'll fight this, Eliza. I swear to you, we'll fight this and win. The school, I'll protect the school. I'll protect the students. Just, please, let me protect you too." Two constables appeared behind Harrison. They looked uncomfortable, clearly unhappy about arresting a duchess, but duty-bound nonetheless. "Lady Eliza Blackthorn, Duchess of Blackthorn," the senior constable said formally. "You are hereby arrested on charges of procurement, corruption of minors, and operating an immoral establishment. You are to come with us immediately." "This is absurd," Adrian said coldly, his duke's voice cutting through the room like a blade. "My wife has done nothing wrong. These charges are fabricated." "That's for the courts to decide, Your Grace. We're just following orders." Eliza squeezed Adrian's hand once, then let go. "It's all right. I'll go with them." "Eliza, if I resist, it makes me look guilty. We both know that." She straightened her shoulders, summoning every ounce of Duchess training she possessed. "I'll face these ridiculous charges with my head high, and then I'll prove them false." The constables led her away in chains. Actual chains locked around her wrists like she was a common criminal. Adrian stood in his study, watching his pregnant wife being taken away to face charges that could destroy her life. and felt a rage so pure it nearly stopped his heart. Vivian wanted war? She would get war. The bail hearing was set for the following morning. Adrian arrived with 3 of London's most expensive solicitors, prepared to pay whatever sum necessary to free his wife. The magistrate, a thin, sour-faced man named Pembleton, barely looked at them. "Bail is denied." Adrian shot to his feet. "On what grounds?" "The severity of the charges, Your Grace. Corruption of minors, procurement for immoral purposes. These are serious crimes. The accused will remain in custody until trial. My wife is pregnant. Holding her in prison could endanger both her life and the child's. The prison has a physician. If Her Grace requires medical attention, it will be provided." Pembleton's expression was cold, calculating. This was a man who'd been paid well to make Eliza suffer. Trial is set for 6 weeks hence. Until then, she remains at Newgate. Newgate Prison. One of the worst hellholes in England, where conditions were brutal and disease rampant. "You can't," Adrian started. "I can and I have. This hearing is concluded." Adrian's solicitors immediately began filing appeals, but the legal machinery ground slowly. It would take days, possibly weeks, to overturn the bail decision. Days that Eliza would spend in a cell. Pregnant. Alone. Facing false charges that could result in transportation or worse. Adrian went to Newgate that afternoon. The guards initially refused to let him see her. Prisoners were allowed 1 visit per week, and today wasn't her designated day. It took a substantial bribe and the full weight of his ducal authority to get past the gates. They led him through corridors that reeked of human misery. The sounds were worse: crying, shouting, the rattle of chains. Eliza's cell was slightly better than the common areas, but only slightly. A narrow bed, a small barred window, walls that wept with damp. She was sitting on the bed when he entered, still wearing the dress she'd been arrested in. Someone had removed her jewelry. Even her wedding ring was gone. "Adrian." Her voice was steady, but her eyes betrayed her fear. "I'm getting you out of here, I swear it." The bail was denied. "I'll appeal. I'll bribe every official in London if I have to. Adrian, stop." Eliza stood, crossing to the bars that separated them. The guards had refused to open the cell, so they had to talk through iron. "You need to focus on the school, the students. The students have instructors. You're my wife. You're carrying our child. You're the priority. If the school closes, everything I've built is destroyed. Everything those girls were working toward vanishes. That matters more than my comfort." "Your comfort?" Adrian stared at her incredulously. "Eliza, this isn't about comfort. This is about your freedom, your life. If you're convicted on these charges, then you'll prove I'm innocent. I know you will." Her hand reached through the bars, finding his. "But while you're doing that, please don't let the school fail. Promise me." Adrian wanted to argue, wanted to shout that she was more important than any school, any students, any charitable endeavor. But he looked into her eyes and saw the same determination that had made him fall in love with her in the first place. "I promise," he said quietly. That night, Adrian called an emergency meeting of his most trusted allies. Lord Pemberton arrived first, Margaret close behind. Then came Adrian's solicitors, his political connections, even some of the more progressive members of Parliament who'd supported Eliza's work. "Vivian Hartley has orchestrated this entire conspiracy," Adrian explained, laying out the evidence. "She's paid witnesses to lie, bribed officials to fast-track the charges, and arranged for Eliza to be held without bail in conditions designed to break her spirit." "Can you prove it?" Lord Pemberton asked. "Not yet, but I will." Adrian's voice was iron. "In the meantime, we need to keep the school running. If it closes, Vivian wins, even if we eventually clear Eliza's name." "The parents are already withdrawing their daughters," Margaret said gently. "The scandal." "Then we find new students. We make it clear that the charges are false, that this is a conspiracy by someone with a personal vendetta." "That might not be enough, Your Grace." Adrian slammed his hand on the table. "Then we make it enough. I will not let that vicious woman destroy everything my wife has built out of petty revenge." Silence fell. Lord Pemberton spoke carefully. "What do you need from us?" "Money, political pressure, testimony about Eliza's character, anything that can help prove these charges are fabricated." Adrian took a breath, steadying himself. and I need someone to run the school while Eliza is imprisoned. Someone society will respect. I'll do it, Margaret said immediately. Adrian looked at her in surprise. Margaret, if you associate yourself with the school now, you'll be tainted by the scandal. Then I'll be tainted. Eliza defended you against Vivian, now I'll defend her. Margaret's chin lifted. Besides, someone needs to show London society that we don't believe these ridiculous charges. One by one, the others in the room pledged their support. It wasn't enough to free Eliza immediately, but it was a start. The following week, Adrian threw himself into 2 parallel battles, clearing his wife's name and keeping her school alive. Margaret took over day-to-day operations, her aristocratic credentials lending legitimacy that helped slow the hemorrhaging of students. Adrian used his political connections to delay the trial, giving them more time to gather evidence. His investigators tracked down Vivian's bribed witnesses one by one, documenting the payments, finding inconsistencies in their stories. But Vivian had been thorough. Every trail led to dead ends. Every witness had been carefully coached. The conspiracy was airtight. Meanwhile, Eliza remained in Newgate. Adrian visited as often as the guards would allow, which wasn't often enough. Each time he saw her, she looked a little more worn, a little more exhausted. The pregnancy was advancing. She was 3 months along now, and the prison conditions were taking their toll. You need better accommodations, he said during one visit, noting the dark circles under her eyes. I'll pay for a private cell, better food, and feed the narrative that I'm a privileged duchess trying to buy special treatment? No. Eliza's voice was firm despite her obvious exhaustion. If I'm going to fight these charges, I need to show I'm not afraid of suffering the same consequences as anyone else would. You're pregnant, you shouldn't be suffering at all. Life isn't fair, Adrian, we both know that. He wanted to rage at the injustice of it. His brilliant, compassionate wife locked in a cell for the crime of trying to help people. Instead, he told her about the school, about Margaret's efforts, about the students who refused to leave, about the small victories they were winning. It was the only thing that made her smile. 4 weeks into her imprisonment, disaster struck. Eliza collapsed during the night. By the time the guards found her, she was unconscious and bleeding. The prison physician, a drunk who'd been dismissed from 3 hospitals already, declared it a miscarriage scare and did nothing. Adrian only found out the next morning when he arrived for his scheduled visit and was told his wife was in the prison infirmary. He bribed, threatened, and finally physically shoved past guards to reach her. Eliza was lying on a cot in a room that reeked of disease, her face white as death, her dress stained with blood. No, Adrian breathed. No, please. Her eyes opened. Adrian? I'm here. Don't move. I'm getting you out of here right now. The baby is going to be fine. You're both going to be fine. He turned to the useless physician hovering nearby. Get a real doctor, now, the best in London. Your Grace, that's not necessary. Adrian grabbed the man by his collar. If my wife or my child dies because of your incompetence, I will destroy you so completely that you'll wish you'd never been born. Get a real doctor, now. The physician fled. Within the hour, Dr. Morrison, London's finest obstetrician, arrived and examined Eliza properly. His face was grim when he finished. The bleeding has stopped, but she's severely stressed and malnourished. These conditions, he gestured at the filthy infirmary, are completely inappropriate for a pregnant woman. Another week here and she could lose the child, possibly her own life. Then we're leaving, Adrian said flatly. Your Grace, I don't have the authority. I don't care about authority. I'm taking my wife home. If you remove her from custody, you'll be charged with obstruction. Let them charge me. I'll face trial beside her if that's what it takes, but I am not leaving her here to die. Dr. Morrison looked between Adrian's determined face and Eliza's pale form on the cot. I'll testify that moving her is medically necessary. It might help. Thank you. Adrian wrapped Eliza in his coat and lifted her into his arms. She was shockingly light, having lost weight despite the pregnancy. You're going to get in trouble, she whispered against his chest. I don't care. Adrian, Eliza, I once told you to give me an heir and disappear. I treated you like a transaction instead of a person. I will spend the rest of my life making up for that cruelty, but right now, in this moment, I am choosing you and our child, over everything else, over law, over duty, over consequences. So please, stop arguing and let me save your life." She started crying. "I love you. I love you too. Now hold on." Carrying his wife, Adrian Blackthorne walked out of Newgate Prison in broad daylight, past shocked guards, past officials shouting about arrest warrants and contempt of court. He didn't care. Let them arrest him. Let them charge him with whatever crimes they could invent. His wife was dying, and he refused to stand by and watch. The carriage ride to Blackthorne Manor was the longest of his life. Eliza drifted in and out of consciousness, her breathing shallow. Dr. Morrison rode with them, monitoring her constantly. "She needs complete bed rest," the doctor said. "Nutrition, clean air, no stress. And even then, the pregnancy is at risk. Whatever she needs, she'll have it." They arrived at the manor to find it surrounded by constables. "Your Grace," the senior officer said as Adrian stepped from the carriage, still carrying Eliza, "you're under arrest for obstruction of justice and aiding a prisoner's escape. My wife is dying. I'm taking her inside." "Sir, I have my orders." "Then you'll have to arrest me after I get her to a bed, because I am not stopping for your orders or anyone else's." The constables looked at each other, clearly uncertain. Arresting a duke was one thing. Arresting a duke carrying his unconscious, pregnant wife was another matter entirely. Adrian didn't wait for them to decide. He carried Eliza inside, up the stairs, to their bedroom. Dr. Morrison followed, already calling for supplies. Only after Eliza was settled in bed, her breathing steadier, color slowly returning to her face, did Adrian allow the constables into his home. "All right," he said quietly. "I'm ready. What are the charges?" But before the senior officer could respond, a commotion erupted downstairs. Voices. Many voices. Lord Pemberton appeared at the bedroom door. "Don't arrest him." Behind him stood Margaret, and behind her a crowd. 20, 30, 40 people. Aristocrats, politicians, wealthy merchants, some of the most powerful people in England, all crowding into Blackthorne Manor. "What's happening?" Adrian asked. "We're creating a scandal bigger than the one Vivian started," Margaret said calmly. "If these constables arrest you for saving your dying wife's life, every person in this room will testify about it. In court, in newspapers, in Parliament, we'll make it the biggest story in England." Lord Pemberton stepped forward. "You'll arrest a duke for getting his pregnant wife medical care? Really? That's the hill you want to die on?" The constables looked trapped. "We have our orders," the senior officer said weakly. "Then go back to whoever gave you those orders," Margaret said sweetly, "and tell them that if they want to arrest the Duke of Blackthorne, they'll have to go through every aristocratic family represented in this room. I'm sure that will go wonderfully for their careers." Silence. Then slowly, the senior constable lowered his arrest warrant. "We'll report back to the magistrate." "You do that," Adrian said quietly. They left. The crowd remained, a wall of aristocratic power protecting one of their own. Adrian looked at them. These people who'd rallied to his defense, who'd risked their own reputations to save him and Eliza. "Thank you," he said hoarsely. "Thank us by proving her innocence," Lord Pemberton replied. "We're buying you time, Adrian. Use it." Over the next week, while Eliza recovered under Dr. Morrison's care, Adrian's investigators finally found what they needed. A former maid in Vivian's household, dismissed shortly before the accusations began, came forward with documents. Letters between Vivian and the magistrate Pemberton, bank records showing payments. Most damning of all, a draft of the original complaint in Vivian's own handwriting, dated weeks before the accusations were officially filed. Proof of conspiracy, proof of perjury, proof that would destroy Vivian's case completely. But there was a problem. "She's fled to France," Adrian's lead investigator reported. "Left Scotland 3 days ago, crossed the Channel before we could stop her. She's beyond English jurisdiction now." Adrian stared at the evidence on his desk. They had proof of Vivian's guilt, but the guilty party was beyond reach. What about the charges against Eliza? With this evidence, they'll be dropped. But Vivian gets away clean. She'll live in exile in France, probably laugh about how she nearly destroyed you. "No," Adrian said softly. She won't. Your Grace. Vivian's mistake was thinking I'd fight her the way she fights, through legal channels and social pressure. But I'm done playing by rules she keeps breaking. Adrian looked up, his expression cold. I want everything. Every crime she's ever committed, every debt she owes, every secret she's tried to hide. I want evidence so damning that even France won't shelter her. That could take months. Then take months. I don't care how long it takes. I want her destroyed so completely that she spends the rest of her life looking over her shoulder, afraid of what I'll do next. The investigator looked uncomfortable. Your Grace, that sounds like revenge. It is. Vivian Hartley tried to kill my wife and my child. She tried to destroy everything Eliza built. She deserves far worse than exile. Adrian's voice dropped to something dangerous. But I'll settle for making sure she never feels safe again. Upstairs, Eliza was finally strong enough to sit up in bed. The bleeding had stopped. Dr. Morrison declared the pregnancy stable, though she'd need to rest for several more weeks. Adrian told her everything. About the evidence, about Vivian's flight to France, about his plans for revenge. Eliza listened quietly, her hand resting on her stomach where their child grew. Let her go, she said finally. Adrian stared at her. What? Vivian is in exile. She's lost everything, her place in society, her home, her reputation. That's punishment enough. She tried to kill you. She tried to break me. She failed. Eliza reached for his hand. Adrian, if you spend the next months or years hunting her down, she still wins. She still controls your life through hate instead of love. Is that what you want? I want justice. Justice is clearing my name and reopening the school. Justice is living a happy life despite everything she tried to do to us. Eliza squeezed his hand. Revenge is poison. I won't let her poison what we've built. Adrian wanted to argue, wanted to make Vivian suffer the way she'd made them suffer, but he looked at his wife, recovering from wounds that could have killed her, still thinking about her school and her students instead of her own pain, and realized she was right. Vivian had already lost. Continuing to fight her would only give her power over their future. All right, he said quietly. We let her go. Thank you. The charges against Eliza were formally dropped 2 weeks later. The evidence of Vivian's conspiracy was presented to Parliament, causing a scandal that resulted in Magistrate Pembleton's removal from office and an investigation into bribed witnesses. The Blackthorn School for Young Women reopened its doors. Students flooded back, not just the ones who'd left, but new ones too, drawn by the story of a Duchess who'd faced prison rather than abandon them. Eliza was celebrated as a hero, the radical Duchess who'd fought the system and won. But there was a cost. The stress of the imprisonment, the near miscarriage, the weeks of recovery, all of it had taken its toll. Dr. Morrison was cautiously optimistic about the pregnancy, but warned that complications were possible. You need complete rest until the child is born, he told Eliza firmly. No teaching, no school administration, no stress of any kind. That's 4 months of doing nothing, Eliza protested. That's 4 months of keeping you and the baby alive, Adrian countered. Don't argue with the doctor. So Eliza rested, confined to bed or gentle walks around the manor, while Adrian ran the school with Margaret's help. It was torture for her, watching her creation flourish from a distance, unable to participate directly. But every time she felt frustrated, she'd feel the baby move inside her and remember what mattered most. The child growing strong and healthy, the husband who'd chosen her over everything else, the life they were building together. One night in late November, as snow began falling over Blackthorn Manor, Eliza woke to find Adrian sitting beside the bed, watching her sleep. What's wrong? She asked sleepily. Nothing. I was thinking about how different things are now than they were a year ago. You mean when you told me to give you an heir and disappear? Adrian winced. Are you ever going to let me forget that? Probably not, Eliza smiled. But I might forgive you eventually. Thank you for not disappearing, he said quietly. Thank you for fighting for us when I was too broken to fight for myself. Thank you for learning to fight back. Outside, the snow continued falling, blanketing the estate in white. And inside Blackthorn Manor, a duke and his duchess, who'd started as strangers bound by duty, fell asleep together, hands intertwined, preparing to face whatever came next. Together. The way it should have been from the beginning. December arrived with bitter cold and unexpected redemption. The first sign came in the form of a letter from Parliament. Lord Ashworth, head of the Committee on Social Reform, requested a meeting with the Duke and Duchess of Blackthorn regarding matters of public education and charitable enterprise. Adrian read the letter twice before handing it to Eliza, who was resting in the library with her feet elevated as Dr. Morrison had ordered. "They want to meet with us?" Her eyes widened. "After everything that happened?" "It seems your arrest and acquittal created more sympathy than scandal, at least among some circles." Adrian sat beside her, studying the formal script. "Ashworth is progressive. He's been pushing for education reform for years. Do you think this is legitimate? Or another trap?" The question hung between them. After Vivian's conspiracy, trust didn't come easily. "I'll attend the meeting alone first," Adrian said. "If it's genuine, you can join for subsequent discussions once you're stronger." "I'm strong enough now." "Eliza, you're 7 months pregnant and were nearly killed 2 months ago. You're staying home." She wanted to argue. He could see it in the set of her jaw, the flash in her eyes, but exhaustion won out. "Fine, but you tell me everything." The meeting took place in Lord Ashworth's office in Westminster, a wood-paneled room filled with books and tobacco smoke. 3 other members of Parliament sat around the table, along with 2 men Adrian didn't recognize. "Your Grace, thank you for coming." Ashworth was a portly man in his 60s with shrewd eyes. "I'll be direct. Your wife's school has caused quite a stir." "I'm aware." "Not the scandal. The results. We've been examining the outcomes of your students. 37 young women placed in respectable employment as governesses or companions in just 6 months. Another 20 learning trades. The literacy rate among your students has jumped 70% in less than a year." Adrian blinked. "You've been monitoring the school?" "Someone had to document whether this experiment in social engineering was actually working or just aristocratic charity theater." Ashworth leaned forward. "It's working, Your Grace, more effectively than any government program we've attempted." One of the other MPs spoke up. "The question is whether it's replicable. One school in London with a Duchess's personal attention is one thing. A network of schools across England is quite another." "You want to expand the program?" Adrian asked carefully. "We want to fund it," Ashworth corrected. "Government money, oversight, and support. In exchange, your wife shares her curriculum and methods so we can establish similar institutions in Manchester, Liverpool, Birmingham, every major city in England." Adrian sat back, stunned. "You want to turn my wife's school into a national program?" "We want to prevent another generation of young women from having no options beyond the factory floor or the streets. Your wife proved it's possible. Now we need to scale it." It was everything Eliza had dreamed of. Recognition that her work mattered, that education could actually change lives, that the fight against poverty and ignorance could be won. "I need to discuss this with my wife," Adrian said slowly. "Of course. But Your Grace, I should warn you. There will be opposition. Powerful opposition from people who believe educating the lower classes is dangerous, who think your wife's methods are too radical. This won't be easy." "Nothing worthwhile ever is," Adrian replied. He returned to Blackthorn Manor to find Eliza in the nursery, supervising the final preparations. The room had been transformed. Soft yellow walls, a beautifully carved cradle, shelves waiting for books and toys. "You're supposed to be resting," Adrian said from the doorway. "I'm sitting down. That counts as resting." She turned, saw his expression, and her hand went to her swollen belly. "What happened? Is it bad news?" "It's extraordinary news." He told her everything. About Parliament's proposal, about the data they'd collected, about the possibility of expanding her single school into a national network. Eliza listened without interrupting, her face cycling through disbelief, hope, and finally cautious joy. "They want to fund us?" she whispered. "They want to fund a national education program based on your model. You'd maintain control of curriculum development and teacher training. They'd provide money and political support." "There has to be a catch." The catch is that we'll face opposition from conservatives who think we're destabilizing the social order. The catch is that every mistake we make will be magnified. The catch is that this will be hard, exhausting work at a time when you should be focused on our child. Eliza stood carefully, moving to the window. Snow was falling again, coating the gardens in pristine white. I spent months in prison for trying to help 60 girls, she said quietly. I nearly lost our baby because someone decided my work was dangerous. And now Parliament wants to take that work and multiply it across England? Yes. She turned to face him, and Adrian saw tears streaming down her face. We're doing this, she said fiercely. We're doing this even if it's hard, even if people oppose us, because those girls deserve better, all of them. Every girl in every city who thinks her future is already decided by her birth. Adrian crossed to her, pulling her into his arms. I know. That's why I already told Ashworth we'd accept. Eliza pulled back to look at him. You did? I know you, Eliza. I know you'd rather die than turn down the chance to help more students. So yes, I accepted on your behalf. Though I did insist on one condition. What condition? That nothing happens until after our child is born and you've recovered. The program can wait 2 months. Our family can't. She kissed him then, there in the nursery that would soon hold their child, surrounded by hope and possibility. Have I told you lately that I love you? She murmured against his lips. Not in the last hour. I love you, Adrian Blackthorne, even when you're being an overprotective duke who makes decisions for me. Especially when I'm being an overprotective duke who makes decisions for you, he corrected, smiling. News of Parliament's proposal leaked within days. The response was immediate and divided. Progressive newspapers hailed it as visionary. The Times published an editorial praising the Duchess of Blackthorne's revolutionary approach to social reform and calling for swift implementation. Conservative papers were less enthusiastic. The Morning Post ran a scathing piece titled Dangerous Precedent, Why Educating the Lower Classes Threatens Social Stability. London society split along predictable lines. Progressive aristocrats, the ones who'd supported Eliza through her trial, rallied behind the program. Dinner parties became debates about education policy and social mobility. Traditional aristocrats viewed it as an attack on the natural order. Lady Worthington, a dowager countess known for her rigid views, publicly declared that the Duchess of Blackthorne is creating a generation of discontented servants who will forget their place. Let them forget their place, Eliza said calmly when Margaret reported the quote. That's rather the point. The real battle began when the proposal reached the House of Lords. Adrian attended every session, speaking passionately about the program's merits. He brought data, employment statistics, literacy rates, testimonials from students who'd transformed their lives through education. The opposition brought fear. Lord Carmichael stood before the assembled peers and painted a dire picture of social chaos. If we educate the lower classes beyond their station, we create dissatisfaction and unrest. A scullery maid who can read philosophy will resent her position. A factory girl who learns mathematics will demand better wages. We risk revolution in the name of charity. We risk justice, Adrian countered from his seat. Lord Carmichael speaks as if ignorance and poverty are natural states to be maintained rather than injustices to be corrected. I've seen what education does. It doesn't make people resentful. It gives them hope. It gives them options beyond crime or destitution. Pretty words from a duke who will never face the consequences, Carmichael shot back. When servants refuse to serve because they think themselves too educated for such work, when the social order collapses because everyone wants to be something other than what they were born to be, it won't be your grace scrubbing his own floors. If my servants chose to leave because education gave them better opportunities, I'd be proud of them, Adrian replied coldly. And if Lord Carmichael's real concern is finding people desperate enough to work for whatever scraps he offers, perhaps the problem isn't education, but his treatment of those who serve him. The chamber erupted in shouting. The vote was called. It failed by 3 votes. Adrian came home that night looking defeated in a way Eliza had never seen before. I'm sorry, he said quietly, slumping in his chair. I thought we had the votes. I thought 3 votes, Eliza interrupted. She was in bed, as ordered, but her mind was sharp despite her exhaustion. 3 votes, Adrian. That means we almost won.
almost doesn't fund schools. No, but it means next time we will win. We just need to change 3 minds. Adrian looked at her skeptically. Some of these lords have held the same opinions for 50 years. Changing their minds isn't... Then we don't change their minds. We change who votes. Eliza struggled to sit up, waving away his attempt to help. How many seats in the Lords turn over each year through death or inheritance? I don't know, 10, 15. And how many young heirs are waiting to inherit who might think differently than their fathers? She smiled, and it was fierce. We didn't lose, Adrian. We just learned we need to be more strategic, more patient, more persistent. You're supposed to be resting, not planning political campaigns. I'm doing both. Watch me. Over the next 2 weeks, while Parliament was in recess for Christmas, Eliza orchestrated a quiet revolution from her bed.
Letters went out to every young heir in the aristocracy, inviting them to visit Blackthorn Manor to discuss the future of English society. Most came out of curiosity. A pregnant duchess conducting political salons from bed was unusual enough to merit attention. What they found was Eliza at her most persuasive. "You're 23, she said to Lord Harrington's eldest son, who'd come more to escape his father than from any real interest. Your father will likely live another 20 years. When you finally inherit his seat in Parliament, do you want to govern a country full of educated, productive citizens, or one where poverty and ignorance breed crime and unrest?" I hadn't really thought about it. Start thinking, because in 20 years you'll be making decisions that affect millions of lives. The question is whether you'll make them from fear and tradition or from evidence and compassion. Young Mr. Harrington left looking thoughtful. Lady Pemberton's nephew came to argue. "My uncle says you're disrupting the social order." "Your uncle is right," Eliza agreed calmly. "I am disrupting an order that keeps half the population in poverty with no way out. If that order deserves to be preserved, make your case." He couldn't. One by one, the future lords of England visited Blackthorn Manor. Some came away unconvinced, but many left thinking about questions they'd never considered before. Questions about justice and opportunity, and whether the world they'd inherit was actually the world they wanted. Margaret watched in awe. "You're building a political movement from your bed." "I'm planting seeds," Eliza corrected. "Whether they grow is up to them." On Christmas Eve, Dr. Morrison made his weekly visit and pronounced Eliza in excellent health despite the stress. "The baby is strong," he said, packing away his instruments. "Should be here within the month, I'd say. Have you chosen names?" Adrian and Eliza exchanged glances. "We have," Adrian said slowly, "but we're not sharing them yet. Too many people have opinions about ducal heirs." What they didn't say was that they'd chosen 2 sets of names, one for a boy, one for a girl, and neither set included any of the traditional Blackthorn family names that had been passed down for generations. Their child would not be weighed down by the past. The new year arrived with unexpected news. Lord Carmichael, Adrian's most vocal opponent in Parliament, had died suddenly of apoplexy. His son, the new Lord Carmichael, was 30 years old and had attended one of Eliza's salons. "I'm sorry for your loss," Adrian said when the young lord came to pay his respects. "Don't be. My father was a bitter old man who believed the world stopped changing in 1780. Young Carmichael looked uncomfortable. "Your Grace, I wanted you to know, when the education proposal comes up for vote again, you'll have my support." Adrian nearly dropped his tea. "You're certain?" "I visited your wife's school, anonymously, after one of her salons. I met the students, saw the curriculum, talked to the instructors." He shook his head. "My father called it dangerous radicalism. I call it basic human decency. These girls aren't being taught revolution. They're being taught to read and support themselves. If that threatens the social order deserves to be threatened." 1 vote secured. Within weeks, 2 more elderly lords passed away. Both were replaced by younger heirs who'd been influenced by Eliza's quiet campaign. The votes were there. "We could bring it to Parliament now," Lord Ashworth said during a private meeting with Adrian. "We have the numbers to pass." "No," Adrian said firmly. "We wait until my wife can be present. She built this program. She fought for it. Or she deserves to be there when it's approved." Ashworth smiled. "You're a good husband, Blackthorn." "I'm learning." On a frigid January night 3 weeks into the new year, Eliza woke Adrian at 2 in the morning. "It's time," she said calmly. Adrian shot out of bed. "Time? Time for what? The baby isn't due for another 2 weeks. Babies don't follow schedules. Get Dr. Morrison." The next 12 hours were the longest of Adrian's life. Dr. Morrison arrived, took command of the bedroom, and banished Adrian to the corridor. Catherine and 2 other maids bustled in and out with hot water and linens, while Adrian paced like a caged animal. From behind the closed door came sounds that made his heart stop. Eliza crying out in pain, Dr. Morrison's calm instructions, long periods of silence that were somehow worse than the noise. Lord Pemberton arrived at dawn, summoned by the household staff who knew their Duke shouldn't be alone. "First children take time," he said, trying to be comforting. "Margaret was in labor for 14 hours with our eldest. Eliza's been through so much already. The prison, the stress, the near miscarriage. She's strong. She'll be fine." Adrian wanted to believe that, tried to believe it, but the sounds from behind the door suggested otherwise. At noon, Dr. Morrison emerged looking grave. "Your Grace, there are complications." Adrian's world tilted. "What kind of complications?" "The baby is breech. I'm trying to turn it, but if I can't—" Morrison paused. "I may need to make a choice. I can likely save the mother or the child, possibly both. But I need to know your preference if it comes to that." "My preference?" Adrian stared at him in horror. "You're asking me to choose between my wife and my child? I'm asking you to be prepared for the worst." Adrian pushed past him into the bedroom. Eliza was propped up on pillows, her face pale and drenched with sweat. But when she saw him, she smiled weakly. "You're not supposed to be in here." "I don't care." Adrian crossed to her, taking her hand. "The doctor says there are complications." "I know. I'm here for it." She squeezed his fingers. "Adrian, if something happens, nothing is going to happen. If it does, I need you to promise me something. Promise me you'll keep fighting for the school, for the program, for all those girls who need someone to believe in them. Eliza, don't—" "Promise me." "I promise," he said hoarsely. "But you're going to be fine. You and the baby both." Another contraction hit. Eliza cried out, her hand crushing his. Dr. Morrison was suddenly there, gently but firmly pushing Adrian aside. "Your Grace, I need room to work. Please." Adrian let himself be led out, but not before he saw the fear in the doctor's eyes. The fear of a man who wasn't certain he could save either patient. The next 2 hours were agony. Adrian prayed to any power that might be listening, made bargains with fate, swore that if Eliza survived, he'd spend the rest of his life being worthy of her. He'd just started contemplating breaking down the door when he heard it. A baby's cry. Thin and reedy at first, then stronger. The most beautiful sound he'd ever heard. Dr. Morrison opened the door and he was smiling. "Your Grace, you have a daughter, and your wife is asking for you." Adrian's legs nearly gave out. "They're both alive?" "Both healthy. It was close, but—" Morrison stepped aside. "Go meet your daughter." Eliza was sitting up in bed, exhausted but radiant, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in white linen. "Adrian," she whispered, "come meet our daughter." He crossed to them on shaking legs, looked down at the impossibly small face peeking out from the blanket. His daughter. She had dark hair like his, but Eliza's nose, tiny perfect fingers that wrapped around his when he offered one. "She's beautiful," he managed through tears. "She's perfect." "She's stubborn," Eliza said fondly. "Refused to be born the easy way. I wonder where she gets that from." "Definitely from you. Definitely from both of us." Adrian sat carefully on the edge of the bed, unable to look away from his daughter's face. "What do we name her?" Eliza asked. They'd discussed this. Had 2 names chosen. But looking at his daughter now, only one felt right. "Grace," Adrian said softly, "for the grace I didn't deserve but received anyway. For the grace that brought me back from being the Ice Duke. For the grace of second chances." "Lady Grace Blackthorne." Eliza tested the name. "I love it." "So do I." 3 days later, Adrian stood before Parliament once more. Lord Ashworth had agreed to delay the vote until after the baby was born. Now, with Grace safely arrived and Eliza recovering well, it was time. Adrian spoke for 20 minutes about education and opportunity and the kind of England he wanted his daughter to inherit. An England where a girl's future wasn't determined by her birth, where intelligence and determination mattered more than social class. My daughter was born into privilege, he concluded. She'll never want for anything material. But what about the thousands of girls born the same day who will grow up in poverty, who will never learn to read, never have opportunities beyond grueling labor? Don't they deserve better? Doesn't England deserve better than to waste half its potential citizens? The vote was called. It passed. 47 to 32. The Blackthorn education program was officially funded and sanctioned by Parliament. Adrian returned home to find Eliza sitting in the nursery, nursing Grace. "We won," he said simply. Eliza looked up, tears streaming down her face. "Tell me everything." So he did, describing the vote, the speeches of support, even the grudging acceptance from some who'd opposed them. "Schools will open in 5 cities by summer," he finished, 20 more by year's end. "And it's all because you refused to disappear when I told you to." "No," Eliza said softly, looking down at their daughter. "It's because you learned to fight beside me instead of against me. Because we became partners instead of strangers. Because love won over fear." Adrian knelt beside the chair, placing his hand over Eliza's where it cradled Grace's head. "I love you," he said. "Both of you. More than I thought I was capable of loving anything." "We love you too," Eliza replied. "Our stubborn, reformed ice duke who learned to thaw." Outside, London was transforming. The first Blackthorn schools were already being established. Young women who'd thought their futures were predetermined were learning they had choices. And in Blackthorn Manor, a family that had started as a cold transaction built on pain and fear had become something real, something beautiful, something worth fighting for. Grace stirred in her mother's arms, and Adrian felt his heart expand with fierce protectiveness. This child would grow up knowing she was wanted, knowing her parents loved each other, knowing that determination and courage could change the world. She would grow up in an England that was slowly becoming better, fairer, more just, because her mother had refused to disappear, and her father had finally learned to truly live. The first spring of Grace's life arrived with transformation sweeping across England like wildfire. By April, 12 Blackthorn schools had opened their doors. Manchester's inaugural class welcomed 80 students. Liverpool had a waiting list of over 200. Birmingham's school was so successful that local merchants were funding a second building. Eliza coordinated everything from Blackthorn Manor, nursing Grace while reviewing curriculum proposals and interviewing instructors through an endless stream of correspondence. Catherine had stopped trying to enforce Dr. Morrison's rest orders. The Duchess would rest when England ran out of girls who needed education. "You're going to exhaust yourself," Adrian warned, finding her at her desk at midnight, Grace sleeping in a cradle beside her while Eliza wrote yet another letter. "I'm fine." "You're working 20 hours a day while caring for a newborn." "That's not fine, that's insanity." Eliza set down her pen and looked at him with those fierce eyes he'd fallen in love with. "Do you know how many girls enrolled in our schools this month? 347. 347 futures that were written in poverty and hopelessness until someone gave them a chance. I can sleep when they're all educated." Adrian crossed to her, gently taking the pen from her hand. "And I can help. You don't have to carry this alone anymore. You're already managing the political side, handling Parliament. Then we hire administrators. We delegate. Eliza, you built something extraordinary. Now let other people help you run it so you don't collapse from exhaustion." She wanted to argue. He could see it in the set of her jaw. But Grace chose that moment to whimper in her sleep, and Eliza's expression softened. "All right," she conceded, "but I'm still approving all curriculum decisions." "I wouldn't expect anything less." They hired Miss Thornton as Director of Educational Standards and brought in 3 more administrators to handle logistics. It helped, but Eliza still spent every available moment working on the program she'd fought so hard to build. Then, in late May, a letter arrived that changed everything. It was from France, from Vivienne. Adrian found it among the Morning Post and nearly threw it in the fire unread. But something made him open it, perhaps morbid curiosity about what the woman who'd tried to destroy them could possibly want now. What he read made his blood boil. Vivian was dying. Consumption, the letter explained in her elegant handwriting, advanced and untreatable. She had perhaps 3 months left, and she wanted to apologize. "She wants to see you," Adrian said flatly, handing the letter to Eliza over breakfast. "Both of us. She's asking us to come to Paris." Eliza read it twice, her face unreadable. This could be another trap. "I know. She tried to have me imprisoned, tried to kill our child, and now she wants us to travel to France so she can apologize before she dies?" "Yes." Eliza set the letter down carefully. "What do you want to do?" Adrian stared at the cream pitcher, at Grace sleeping peacefully in her bassinet beside the table, at his wife who'd survived everything Vivian had thrown at them. "Part of me wants to burn this letter and forget she exists," he admitted. "Part of me wants to go to Paris just to watch her suffer, and part of me—" He stopped, struggling with words. "Part of me wonders if we need this closure, if seeing her one final time might finally put all that pain to rest. You still hurt from what she did to you 7 years ago." It wasn't a question. "Yes," Adrian said quietly. "Not like I used to, not in a way that poisons everything anymore, but yes, there's still a wound there, and I think maybe she knows it." Eliza reached across the table, taking his hand. "Then we go to Paris. We listen to what she has to say. And then we close that chapter of our lives forever." They left Grace with Catherine and Margaret, who promised to guard the baby with their lives. The journey to Paris took 3 days by ship and carriage, 3 days during which Adrian grew progressively quieter. "Talk to me," Eliza said as their carriage rolled through the French countryside. "I'm afraid." "Of Vivian? Of how I'll react when I see her. What if all that old anger comes back? What if I can't forgive her? What if I say something that proves she still has power over me?" Eliza shifted closer, resting her head on his shoulder. "Then you say it, and we deal with it. Adrian, you're not that broken man anymore. You're a father, a husband, a duke who's changing England through education reform. Vivian can't take any of that away unless you let her. What if I'm not as healed as I think I am? Then we'll find out together." They found Vivian in a small apartment in the Marais district, far from the grand townhouses she'd once inhabited in London. The woman who opened the door was a ghost of the beauty who'd destroyed Adrian 7 years ago. Consumption had ravaged her. She was rail-thin, her skin waxy and pale, dark circles under eyes that had once captivated ballrooms. She wore a simple day dress instead of the elaborate gowns that had been her trademark. She looked like she was already dying. "Adrian," she whispered, "you came. You asked us to. And you must be the legendary Duchess of Blackthorn." Vivian's gaze shifted to Eliza, and something complicated crossed her face. "The woman who succeeded where I failed." "I didn't fail at anything," Eliza said coolly. "I married a man who was capable of learning to love again. That's not failure. That's fortune." A weak smile touched Vivian's lips. "She has your spirit, Adrian. The spirit you had before I broke it. I'm glad you found it again." They sat in Vivian's cramped parlor, such a far cry from the luxury she'd once demanded. A maid brought tea that no one drank. "Why did you ask us here?" Adrian finally asked. "What could you possibly say that would matter now?" Vivian was quiet for a long moment, her skeletal hands clasped in her lap. When she spoke, her voice was barely audible. "I destroyed you because I was a coward, because I wanted your title and money, but didn't have the courage to love you the way you deserved to be loved. So I convinced myself you were the problem, that you were too serious, too intense, too demanding of real emotion. I told myself you would never make me happy." "So you ran away with my best friend," Adrian said flatly. "So I ran away with a man who promised me passion and adventure and all the things I thought I wanted." Vivian's laugh was bitter, broken. "He left me 6 months later for a French actress, spent all the money I'd brought with me and disappeared. I remarried quickly, to a baronet who needed my family connections more than he wanted me. And I spent 7 years being slowly miserable, watching you from a distance, seeing you turn into the Ice Duke and telling myself it was your fault. that you'd always been cold. She looked at Adrian directly for the first time. Then you married her, and suddenly you weren't cold anymore. You were fighting for your wife, defending her, loving her openly. And I realized the problem was never you, it was me. You were capable of love. I just wasn't worthy of it. Adrian's hands clenched on his knees. Eliza placed her hand over his, anchoring him. So you tried to destroy Eliza out of jealousy, Eliza said. I tried to destroy her because seeing you happy made me face the truth, that I'd thrown away the best thing that ever happened to me because I was too selfish and stupid to appreciate it. Vivian's eyes filled with tears. I wanted you to hurt the way I was hurting. I wanted your perfect new marriage to fail so I could tell myself that you were the problem, not me. You could have killed her, Adrian said, his voice shaking with suppressed rage. You could have killed my wife and my unborn child with your lies and your conspiracy. And you want absolution? You want me to forgive you before you die so you can go to your grave with a clear conscience? No, Vivian said simply. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I just wanted you to know the truth, that you were never the problem, that you were always capable of the love and happiness I saw you find with her, and that I'm sorry for the years I stole from you by making you doubt that. Silence filled the small room. Adrian stood abruptly, moving to the window. His shoulders were tight with tension, his breathing harsh. Eliza watched him, waiting. This was his pain, his history. She couldn't heal it for him. 7 years, Adrian finally said, not turning around. 7 years I spent dead inside because of what you did. I stopped believing in love, in trust, in anything good. I married Eliza thinking I could have a wife without risk, an heir without emotion. I was ready to ruin the best thing in my life because you convinced me that love always ended in betrayal. I know. I'm not finished. Adrian turned and his face was carved from ice. You took 7 years from me, Vivian. Years I could have spent being happy instead of being frozen. You nearly destroyed the woman I love because you couldn't stand to see me move on. And now you're dying and you want to apologize? Vivian bowed her head, tears streaming down her wasted face. I know it's not enough. I know sorry doesn't fix anything. You're right, it doesn't. Adrian crossed back to where she sat, and his voice dropped to something dangerous. But I'm going to give you something anyway. Something you don't deserve, but I need to give for my own peace of mind. He knelt, putting himself at eye level with the woman who'd destroyed him. I forgive you. Vivian's head snapped up, shock written across her face. Not for you, Adrian continued, for me. Because carrying hatred for you was still letting you control my life. Because my daughter deserves a father who isn't poisoned by bitterness. Because my wife, he glanced at Eliza, taught me that love is stronger than fear, and forgiveness is stronger than revenge. Fresh tears poured down Vivian's cheeks. Adrian, I forgive you, he repeated, and then I'm leaving this room and never thinking about you again. You'll die alone with your regrets, and I'll go home to my family and my life and everything you tried to destroy. That's your punishment, Vivian, not my hatred, my complete and total indifference to whether you find peace or not. He stood, offered his arm to Eliza. We're done here. They were halfway to the door when Vivian spoke one last time. She's extraordinary, Adrian, your Duchess. Don't ever let her go. Adrian paused, looked back. I won't. But not because you told me to, because I finally learned what you never understood, that real love requires courage, not cowardice. They left Vivian dying in her Parisian apartment and didn't look back. In the carriage, Eliza held Adrian while he shook with suppressed emotion, not crying, just releasing years of pain that he'd finally allowed himself to let go. I meant it, he said eventually. I do forgive her, not for her sake, but because I'm tired of carrying that weight. I know. And I'm done letting my past dictate my future. I know that too. Adrian pulled back to look at his wife. How did you get so wise? I married a man who ordered me to disappear and decided to become indispensable instead. That kind of stubborn determination teaches you things. He laughed, a real laugh, free and genuine. Best decision I never made. What? Marrying you was supposed to be a cold transaction, Instead, it became the best thing that ever happened to me. So technically, the best decision I never consciously made. You're an idiot, Eliza said fondly. I'm your idiot. Yes, you are. They returned to London to find the program thriving beyond anyone's expectations. 20 schools were now operational, 5 more were under construction. The literacy rate among working-class girls in London had jumped 12% in just 6 months, and the opposition was crumbling. Lady Worthington, the Dowager Countess who'd publicly criticized Eliza's work, attended a school graduation ceremony in June. Watching 60 young women receive certificates of completion, seeing their pride and hope and determination, something shifted in her rigid worldview. I was wrong, she told Eliza bluntly afterward. I thought educating these girls would make them dissatisfied and rebellious. Instead, it's made them capable and confident. England needs more of this, not less. Does this mean you'll support the program? Eliza asked carefully. It means I'll stop opposing it, which for me is practically the same thing. It was enough. By autumn, even the most conservative members of Parliament had stopped fighting the Blackthorn education program. The results were too clear, the success too obvious to deny. Adrian was invited to speak at Oxford about social reform. Eliza was asked to advise the Queen on expanding educational opportunities for women across the empire. The Ice Duke and his radical Duchess had become the most powerful force for change in England, but the real transformation was quieter, more personal. Grace took her first steps in October, tottering across the nursery into Adrian's waiting arms, while Eliza watched with tears streaming down her face. "She's walking," Adrian said unnecessarily, his voice choked with emotion. "She's growing," Eliza corrected. "Growing up in a house full of love instead of ice. Growing up knowing she matters, knowing her parents chose each other, knowing the world can change if you're brave enough to fight for it." Adrian pulled both his girls into his arms, his wife and his daughter, the 2 people who'd saved him from a life of frozen misery. "I used to think happiness was a fairy tale," he said quietly, "something that happened to other people but never to me. And now? Now I know it's a choice to be vulnerable, to trust, to love even when it's terrifying. A choice you made for me when I was too broken to make it myself." "We made it together," Eliza corrected. "You chose to change, Adrian. I just showed you it was possible." Grace babbled happily between them, oblivious to the profound moment her parents were sharing. On a cold December evening, 1 year after Grace's birth, Eliza stood before 200 graduates of Blackthorn schools across England. They'd gathered in London for the first national graduation ceremony. Young women who'd been servants and factory workers and street vendors, now qualified as teachers, governesses, bookkeepers, and skilled tradeswomen. Adrian sat in the front row, holding Grace, watching his wife address the crowd with the same passion and determination that had first broken through his frozen heart. "You were told your futures were already written," Eliza said, her voice carrying across the hall. "You were told that girls born in poverty stay in poverty, that education was for the privileged, not for you, that dreaming of something better was foolish and dangerous." The young women leaned forward, hanging on every word. "You proved them wrong, not through luck or charity, but through your own intelligence and determination. You learned, you studied, you fought for opportunities that should have been yours from birth. And now you stand here with certificates that say you are educated, capable, valuable members of society." Applause erupted, but Eliza held up a hand. "This is not the end. This is the beginning. You are the first generation of women to benefit from systematic education regardless of birth. But you won't be the last. The schools will continue, more will open, more girls will have the chances you fought for. And someday, maybe not in my lifetime, but someday, no girl in England will be denied education because of poverty." She paused, her gaze sweeping across the crowd. "You are proof that change is possible, that courage and determination can overcome any obstacle, that a woman told to disappear can instead become indispensable." More applause, thunderous this time. Adrian stood, still holding Grace, and joined his wife on the stage. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone. The Duke of Blackthorn publicly supporting his wife's revolutionary work, their daughter representing the next generation that would inherit this changed England. "My husband once gave me a command," Eliza said, taking Grace from Adrian's arms. "He told me to give him an heir and then disappear. It was meant to keep me at a distance, to protect him from the possibility of pain. She looked at Adrian, and the love in her eyes was visible to everyone in the room. I refused. I became indispensable instead. I built schools and fought for education and challenged every assumption about what a duchess should be. And in doing so, I didn't just change England. I changed the man who tried to make me disappear. Adrian took her free hand, addressing the crowd himself. I was the Ice Duke, a man so broken by betrayal that I shut out all possibility of love or joy. I married this extraordinary woman, thinking I could have a dynasty without emotion, an heir without affection. I was wrong about everything. His voice grew stronger. My wife taught me that real strength isn't in staying frozen and protected. It's in being vulnerable enough to love, brave enough to fight for what matters, and wise enough to know that the best things in life require risk. She refused to disappear, and in doing so, she saved my life. He raised their joined hands. Every girl who graduates from a Blackthorn school is proof that one person's courage can change the world. My wife changed mine. You're changing England's. Never let anyone tell you to disappear. Be indispensable instead. The applause was deafening. That night, after the celebration ended and Grace was asleep in her nursery, Adrian found Eliza on the balcony of their bedroom, looking out over the London skyline. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "About how different everything is from our wedding night, how far we've come. Do you regret any of it? The fights, the scandal, the prison?" Eliza turned in his arms to face him. "I regret that it was necessary. I regret that helping people required such a battle, but I don't regret the outcome. We built something real, Adrian, something that will outlast both of us. We built a family. We built more than that. We built a legacy. Grace will grow up in an England where women have opportunities, where education isn't reserved for the privileged, where girls born in poverty aren't trapped there forever." Adrian kissed her forehead. "Because you refused to disappear. Because we refused to let fear win." 5 years later, the Blackthorn education program had expanded to every major city in England, with branches opening in Scotland and Wales. Over 10,000 young women had graduated, transforming the social fabric of the nation. Grace, now 6 years old, attended the opening of the 100th Blackthorn School in Birmingham. She stood beside her mother, holding the ceremonial ribbon, and said in a clear voice that carried across the crowd, "My mother says education is the most powerful weapon for changing the world. Today, we're giving that weapon to more girls who will use it to change their lives." She cut the ribbon with confidence beyond her years, already showing signs of the fierce determination she'd inherited from both parents. Adrian watched from the side, his heart full to bursting. His daughter would never know what it meant to be ordered to disappear. She would grow up knowing she was wanted, valued, essential, just like her mother had proven herself to be. That evening, as the family returned to Blackthorn Manor, Grace fell asleep in the carriage with her head on Eliza's shoulder. "She's going to change the world," Adrian said quietly. "She already is," Eliza replied, "just by existing in a world where girls like her know they matter." "You did that. You built that world. We built it together, you and me and everyone who believed that England could be better." Adrian looked at his wife, still beautiful, still fierce, still the woman who'd refused to disappear when ordered, and instead had changed everything. "I love you," he said, "more than I thought possible, more than words can express." "I know," Eliza said, smiling. "You show me every day, in the way you support my work, the way you love our daughter, the way you've become the man I always knew you could be. Because you saw it first, when I was still frozen. Because you were always capable of it. You just needed someone stubborn enough to prove it to you." The carriage rolled through the gates of Blackthorn Manor, no longer a cold, imposing fortress, but a home filled with love, laughter, and the sound of a child growing up knowing she was cherished. Grace stirred in her sleep, murmuring something about schools and books and teaching, already dreaming of changing the world, just like her mother. The Ice Duke was gone, replaced by a man who loved fiercely and publicly and without reservation. The woman ordered to disappear had become the most influential duchess in England, her schools and programs changing lives across the nation. And their daughter, their fierce, brilliant, beloved daughter, would carry that legacy forward into a future her parents had fought so hard to build, a future where no girl would ever be told to disappear, where being indispensable was the starting point, not the impossible dream, where love, courage, and determination could overcome any obstacle. The future Adrian and Eliza Blackthorne had created together, one refused command at a time. And in their bedroom that night, after Grace was tucked safely into bed, Adrian held his wife close and whispered the words he should have said on their wedding night. "Thank you for refusing to disappear. Thank you for saving me. Thank you for building this life with me instead of the cold transaction I tried to force on us both." Eliza kissed him, soft and sweet and full of the love that had transformed them both. "Thank you for learning to love me. It made all the fighting worthwhile. I'll spend the rest of my life being worthy of you. You already are. You just needed to see it." Outside, England slept under a blanket of stars. Across the nation, in 100 schools bearing the Blackthorne name, young women dreamed of futures that had once seemed impossible, all because a duchess had refused to disappear, all because a duke had learned to love, all because courage, in the end, was always stronger than fear. And the woman who'd been ordered into silence had instead changed the world with her voice. The Ice Duke's bride had become England's revolutionary, and the marriage built on duty had transformed into the greatest love story neither of them had expected. Complete, perfect, indispensable.